So as we dive into the essence of our conference, I'm thrilled to present our first speaker, Mr. Avnit Anand, Senior Manager at BADRI, who will be shedding light on emerging risk, especially climate and cyber risk. Please welcome him on stage.
Hello, good morning everyone, and thank you, Shruti. Okay, I'll be covering the emerging risk with respect to climate and cyber risk. This has been quite a hot topic for some time now, but we'll be covering the particular aspects which are affecting the insurance industry and which are required to be catered by the insurance industry so as to look into it. I'll be starting with the climate risk first, but before we start, I have a question for everyone that's on a Menti. So do you feel the climate change is impacting the industry? I'll take a minute, you all guys can answer. Okay, so we have got the responses, and I think the 90% of the people here are favoring it, that it's affecting the industry. Okay. So as you see that I've tried to create a timeline in the GCC region. So there have been many floods and all those things that are happening in this region. The very last that happened, like the major accident that happened, was a Gantua pileup way back in 2008. But in the recent years, every year something or the other is happening. If you see from 2018, there have been numerous cyclones that are affecting the region, latest being the cyclone Tej. However, it did not impact that much, but yeah, every year something or the other is happening. So this shows that how frequent the climate risk is coming into the action. Okay, what is climate change? So basically climate change refers to the long-term shifts in the temperatures and the weather patterns that we are seeing around us. So it can be through the natural climatic changes activities, for example, the volcanic eruptions or the floods and everything, or it can be man-made. Man-made pertain to burning of fossil fuels or global warming due to it. So what are the risks associated with the climate? So there are basically three major risks: the physical risk, the transition risk, and the liability risk. First, I'll be covering the physical risk, which is affecting the most. So there are two types of physical risk because of the climate change that affects. One is the direct, which has the direct impact on the loss of property and damages. And the second one is the indirect, which are the supply chain issues, the second order effects because of the physical damage that happens. This has effect highly to the insurers. For example, if I talk about an example, the supply chain issues. If there is a flood or anything that is earthquake that is happening in the region and their manufacturing capacity goes down, then the spare parts for the motor is not available. Then hence, because of that supply chain issues, there would be issues in the servicing those, and also the cost would go up. So these are the second order impact that happens due to this. The other risk is on the transition risk. Now, since because of the sentiments towards the climate change, there have been patterns that has been seen that industries are moving to the low carbonization. So because of this transition now, so there would be a transitional shift in the insurance industry as well. For example, not insuring the coastal areas if the sea level is going up, and so on and so forth. There can be other transition risks due to this. For example, the policy changes that insurance companies have to build in, the reputational risk of not insuring the coal mines, for example, or the areas which are related to oil and oil products in this region, the sentiments behind that. And then there is a technical advancement, changes in the assumption or everything in the CAT modeling or something of that sort. So all these are transition risks which would impact the insurers as such. The last of this climatic risk is on the liability side of things. So basically liability is the risk to the insurers which they are exposed through their policy to the right. For example, the professional liability, in case they fail to communicate, like what is the exactly how to account for the climate related risk. There are certain legal risks as well involved, the legal changes that are coming up. For example, failure to adopt to the climatic change, and as part of the disclosures as well. So there would be there are insufficient disclosures right now. But if you see in the UK and European regions, they are coming up with TFCD and all those things. So there are other risks related to these. Okay, what is the impact on the insurance industry due to the climate change? So basically there are numerous risks, but I have tried to list the important one. The very first one would be, of course, the accumulation of risk. For example, a flood happening in a region, it would affect that location. And if our concentration of insuring is in that more, for example, motor insurance is more, so it would have an accumulation around that. There are other risks related to the climate changes, the shrinking markets, like I explained to you, like not insuring because of the sentiments that are going ahead. Latent claims, for example, water pollution is happening in a nearby area and you're insuring some industry, and later on, after so many years, you come to know that there is a claim due to that. And other specific risks due to the model or the selection, you need to change the assumptions in the models that are there, and of course, adapting the model to the new climatic changes that are coming along. So what role industry can play to tackle these climate related risks? So there are numerous areas that industry can work together to help tackle these risks. For example, bring changes to your existing models. How we do that? There can be different strategies, which I'll just cover in the upcoming slides. Then there can be creating innovative products by if you're not insuring the weather sentiment related products, there can be some other areas that can be insured. Keeping all the stakeholders aligned. Basically, this is very important because we need to have certain policy wordings or exclusions so that all the stakeholders are aligned that what is covered and what is not covered. And also, as an industry, we should share knowledge and expertise because this is a constant evolving risk, and we are very new into it. There can be some alternate things that can be done. For example, develop new investment strategies, because again, on the investment side of things also, people are moving away from the investment side of things where we are insuring to the companies related to the climate. Also, there can be some risk management and governance around it. Again, I'll be covering it in the future slides. Be active in climate related disaster planning. For example, industry can come together and have an impact on building those codes, for example, related to properties and all where the earthquakes are happening or something, just as an example. Also, it is very important to have disclosures. So this is very important with respect to the quantification of the climatic risk. So disclosures have started off in the other regions, and I think it would flow in this region as well very soon. So we should understand how to quantify and come up with those disclosures. So these are the few observations that we had, that how can we tackle climate risks. Okay, so there are various impact on the key areas there are various impact on the insurance industry due to climate, but I've tried to list down like a couple of them here. The first one is on the pricing and underwriting. Now, because of the constant evaluation of these risks, so as I explained that new things are coming up, there are floods, there are new type of insurances are coming up. So how do we price those and how do we underwrite those? So we have to be very mindful on those trends. We have to look into those trends. Then there can be different strategies that can be evolved. For example, for pricing of low frequency and high severity, we use the CAT model, which has the assumptions about the incidence of the risk and how the expected value and variability of losses would look like. So we need to study those trends. So all the three risks that I talked about in the slides before. So for example, physical risks. So there might be something new, more subsidence risks that are coming due to more changing weather patterns. The transition risk, a very classic example, like right now we are living in the world of like electric motor and all. So storage of batteries is a new transition risk that is coming up. So insurer might start insuring those, but how to tackle? Do we have the data? Do we have the assumptions? Do we know what's happening around if the loss occurs? There can be other liability risk, for example, for the public and private liability due to negligence and all. So underwriting is also being affected. Underwriters need to sit along with the teams and understand. And the example that I gave before, for example, because of rising sea levels, certain coastal areas are not being insured anymore. And then hence we have to see alternative ways how to get hold of these problems. Other major area is on the CAT modeling. So climate is always related to CAT. So the current models and assumptions that we have would not work in the future, would not likely to work in the future. So there are few strategies that we can come up with. So here I've tried to list down 3 strategies. There can be some short-term approaches, medium term and long term. For short term, what can be done, the current model can be studied and the assumptions can be varied to study the impact and compare it with the actual losses that we are having. The medium term approach can be the sensitivity testing around those with the time scales of around 5 to 10 years. You test, you change your sensitivities, check with the actual claims that are happened in the past. you can come up with those assumptions. Or the long-term approach can be, it's a forward-looking approach basically. You need to understand the businesses and the areas that we are trying to underwrite, try to build on assumptions on that, and thus change your assumption in this. So the calibration of a model is very important, but it's a challenging task right now in the industry to understand those assumptions and implement to have the correct expected losses around. The other major area to look forward is in the field of risk management. This is very important. My colleague would be covering in the future slides as well. But the risk management aspect is currently lacking in the current scheme of things as well. But with respect to climate change, it's a very important function to look out for. So for example, understanding the impact of climate change, and then incorporating the risk registers due to the climatic changes. For example, identification, quantification, and potential mitigations of those risks. And then carrying out the stress and scenario testing. And finally, making the appropriate disclosures. Like I was talking about the TCFD, this exposure happening in other markets. And this will also help gauge the risk appetite of a company or as an insurance industry, which risk to write, which risk to not to write. Okay, now I'll be jumping onto the cyber risk. This has been quite some time, but it's again a hot topic. People tend to overlook things. So before we move on to the other set of slides, I'll just ask one more question here. Have you ever had a cyber attack in your company? Okay, so most of the people are saying no. So probably they are not aware of, or if they feel that there is no cyber attack. So the majority says no. Okay, let's see what are the aspects of the cyber attack. So here is the statistics that I've taken from the Positive Technologies, which is a firm which tracks the global cyber attacks that are happening. So this is with respect to the Middle East. So these are the number of successful cyber attacks that have happened in the recent quarters. And what type of attack actually has happened is listed here. So basically the attacks have happened with respect to the computers, servers, mobile devices, web resources, and with respect to the individuals and organization. So there's a recent report that was published in the national news that UAE alone has thwarted 70 million attacks this year itself. That's a huge lot of number that is coming from Head of Security Council. But the point I'm trying to make here is, so we are just generally aware of the cyber risk in these four broad categories: a virus attack, hacker attack, infringement, and identity fraud. I'm sure we all are aware of this. So virus attack is like attacking your system and making it slow. Hacker attack is like taking into ransom of your some system. Infringement is like of the label, and the identity fraud, like fraudulently using your email IDs or something. So people are generally say that these are the broad categories of cyber risk. But there is another class of cyber risk that is coming up new, which is called the silent cyber risks. So unknowingly or knowingly, like people or the industry is writing the policies, but they're not sure what's the coverage is. So I've listed down 3 examples what silent cyber risk comprise of. So for example, a business interruption claim that is happening. So someone taking control of the sales system and then just manipulating it. Then there is a massive backlog that is created because of that. So this is a kind of a silent cyber attack. You are not exposed to the attack directly, but someone taking control of your sales system is a kind of a silent cyber attack. The other example can be due to in the energy field. For example, hacking temperature reading, which causes a explosion. Again, it was not directly AI or something that is happening directly into your system, but some with respect to the silent cyber risk. Medical malpractice, electric shutdown during an operation, and then it leads to a huge claim. So these are all example of silent cyber risk. And why these are existing? Because the policy wordings are sufficiently not clear, or their insurers are not designed or priced the policies to include these claims specifically. And insured have reasonable expectations of these coverages. So unknowingly, we are not writing in the policy explicitly, but it is the expectation that these would be covered, and these are not directly related to cyber. So why it is a concern? So basically this risk remains underestimated all throughout. It's a systematic risk to the complete industry. And then there are risks of underpricing and under-reserving it. So you're not covering in the policies, but eventually a claim is coming, then the margins were not built in already. And also it's not reported anywhere in terms of reporting in the any regulatory report or something. And since more and more sectors are getting digitized, unknowingly we are writing those risks. So what are the possible actions that can be taken to again counter these? So for example, there can be some tightened policy wordings, explicitly mentioned what is covered, what is not covered. Then there can be increased awareness among the industry with respect to data pooling and then creating an industry benchmarks out of this. Refraining writing certain lines of businesses, or a regulatory setup can be there. There can be certain restriction on the amount of exposure that a company or as an industry that can be written. So these are the possible actions that can be taken on these silent cyber risks in specific. Thank you everyone, this was it, and I think we can take the question once my colleague takes up the ESG part, and then we can take up the questions along with this. I'll like to call Amar. Thank you.